It's time for Think, Change, Repeat. And now, the host of Think, Change, Repeat, Ashley.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Think, Change, Repeat. I believe this is episode number 6. Today's date is May the 14th, 2026. And with me today, I have my guest, Dave, Natureboy, Naughty by Nature from the Thirdrail podcast. And we're going to be talking about what is actually going on in Iran. And I don't know that we're going to be able to solve that, but we are going to have some conversations and show maybe some interesting pieces of media that will just provide you with a little more food for thought. And feel free to chime in and let us know. And if you have other good resources that you find to be reliable news sources in this crazy time that we find ourselves, then we would be happy to take a look at them. So without further ado, Dave, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Ashley. Just hanging out with you. Getting
Yes,
ready to
thank
talk
you.
about some crazy stuff here coming on in a crazy world.
Yes. And I do apologize to my audience that I did not have a good intro prepared like you for your shows. I thought about doing an homage to your show and saying, starting out, did you ever wonder what is actually going on in Iran? So maybe another time, but I do appreciate you being here. I know that you have your own show, you're busy, you have a job, all the things. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoy hanging out with you. And it's either this or doing laundry. So I much rather hang out with you than do laundry and all that stuff. So I still have clean clothes. You know, I'm not running out of underwear in that here. But
Perfect. Listen, laundry has been a struggle, a personal struggle of mine for a very long time. So I get it. I would definitely rather be podcasting than doing laundry. So again, thank you for being here. And one of the things that we were talking about off stage and what we're going to talk about on our show is what is going on with the quote conflict in Iran. And I think that it's very difficult for us to discern. And you echoed that sentiment that it is really hard for us to actually know what's going on. And we're getting a lot of mixed messages. We're getting a lot of, even from the people that you should be able to reliably at least have an idea of the basics, right? So even if we're questioning our news sources, but if we're going by Trump's Truth Social post or information from Hegseth or something like that, we're not getting a clear answer. We've had when we started, I think we're on like the 73rd or 78th day or something like that of this conflict. And we were given a lot of reasons why. We'll get into that. But I wanted to ask you, where are you at on this? And then if you are looking into different news sources or media, where are you getting that media from? And what challenges do you have in regards to that?
as far as sources, I'll listen to a lot of podcasts like Ryan Christian, Charlie Robinson, of course, AM Wake Up, to get kind of my pulse of what's going on. If I want to search to get any type of, I don't know if you can even find honesty about what's going on the ground, then I'll go out and look at like an Al Jazeera or look at foreign different papers. And, I'd even like to do Haaretz or the Israeli Times, but I think both of those are paywalled and I don't know how to get around those. If there's something really interests me, then I'll go find the sources that I can discern who, maybe not, I can't say authorities, that might be too strong of a word, but good sources of information who have a reliable track record. And then I'll just go digging and see what I could find and then use discernment and knowledge of the sources I'm getting the information from to kind of separate the chaff from the wheat. But it's getting more and more difficult, like we were talking about earlier now, because the narrative machine is so sophisticated, so well developed that to find a good open source is much more difficult than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago when the internet was relatively free. You might have to do a lot of digging to find people who could write well or could format their website well, because that was back in the HTML days, right? But you could get good information from a variety of sources. Now, if you go out and want to do a research and just think you're going to go to Google and put in Google and get honest information, you're being fooled. And I got a bridge, I'll sell you real cheap, because those are all completely algorithmically AI, corporately controlled. And the narrative machine is down to a granular level where you can go onto a website and do a Google search, and that Google search will be specifically tailored for you in a manner that they want you to act or to think. I mean, they as in the Google searches, the machine, the algorithms. So it's real tricky. I got a little bit long-winded, but that kind of answer your question.
Yes, it does. I think that what you've said, it encompasses the difficulty of finding good information. And the weird thing is like a basic, not represented from one side or the other, but like factually.
Yeah.
Did a ship get blown up today? Were bombs dropped today? Were missiles launched today? And who did it? So just not having a good grasp on that. And maybe it's always been that way, right? Maybe it has always been because, when I was a child, this was at the when Iraq 1 was launching. And I remember seeing a lot about that on the regular everyday news. And now I'm very distanced from traditional news outlets in that way. We don't just have on the news 5 o'clock or whatever from these sources. So I'm sure that there was a spin in that, but it felt like you could at least get an update. Like, today we invaded Iraq. Today, they tore down, and this might have been Iraq too, but they tore down the statue for Saddam Hussein, whatever that is. So I find that to be very difficult. And then, like you said, I think that there's something that I try to be aware of, which is algorithmic manipulation that is going to lead you into one way or the other. And then I do think that emphasizes the importance of being able to have access to information, several different sources, so you can kind of try to keep your finger on the pulse in regards to like what you're saying, like a handful of news sites. So maybe you want to look at Al Jazeera, maybe you want to look at RT, maybe you want to look at Fox, maybe you want to look at Judge Napolitano, and all of these different sort of outlets to just get an idea of what you think is going on. Not even necessarily to form an opinion, just to have some information that you feel solidly comfortable believing, because of this current information fog that we find ourselves in. It's very difficult. And as you said, the algorithm has certainly, they say that the original Google, their motto or company slogan, however you want to say that, was "Do no evil," and they changed that and dropped it. And so now we know that people who had websites that were potentially very popular or trending, that changed with the advertising model. That complicated things. And then, those particular websites would be pushed to the top. But then there's also the general algorithmic manipulation, and who knows what sort of tie-ins big tech has, from like Google to Meta to Twitter, in order to sort of cater that stuff.
I know one central thread that goes through all of them, and that's In-Q-Tel.
There we go.
So that should tell you everything that you need to know. And it also goes into Palantir, which is now, the United States government is now being replaced by Palantir and AI. It's still in the infant stages, maybe getting into the toddler stages if it was a child. But when it gets to be a full-blown adult, it's going to be one psychopathic son of a bitch. It's going to have no mercy on anything. But everything seems to be connected. The higher you go and the deeper you go down the rabbit holes, it's all connected. It's like there's a cat out there, 7 C's. that does a really good job. It's kind of like Richard Grove with that type of web map where,
Yes, the Lombardi model based on the artist Mark Lombardi.
Yeah, when you really get down in the depths of some of those, you start seeing interlinks and connections between entities that you would have no thought would be in any slightest way of connected. And the higher you go, the tighter that web gets, the fewer people are there, and the more power that's consolidated. And as far as like just personal networks, if you will, the Epstein files are revealing tons and tons of information on how the power elite, the people that are not just CEOs, but sit on boards that sit on multiple boards that have power to make global changes like that. You start seeing connections. You start seeing it in government. You see it in a secular world, and not to go off on a tangent, because I could see 20 million rabbit holes I could go down, but also on an esoteric spiritual level. That's another thing the Epstein files are bringing out is the rituals that the elite engage in. And it's very much like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. Ironically, he died a couple weeks before it was released, and the assistant editor said in his paraphrase, says, "The film we shot was not the film that they showed in the theaters." Just saying. So you have that. And I find it fascinating. I've always been fascinated with power on a global level and how it works. I use a visual model, a tool, if you will, of just a pyramid. Find that real helpful, because the higher you go, the smaller the amount of stones, but the more power it has. If those stones were power,
right? The power pyramid.
Right. Then I ask myself, well, who's the capstone? Now that's a million and one rabbit holes.
Right. I agree with you. And that's one of the things that I do ponder in this environment that we find ourselves in is, I mean, there's a lot of questions that I have about if we have other people outside of our politicians pulling the strings, then who are they? And I know that this is, we get the messaging a lot that it is people that we don't know their names. And I'm open to that. But I also have been thinking about this stuff in, if we just look at it in a purely materialist way, then we can see something is obviously off. Whether, even if we leave out intentionality, or if we leave out the kind of like what we were talking about a little bit before, like off stage, these age-old plans, which again, I am open to that possibility. But even if we leave that out and we stick to like what we're actually seeing, then there's still a lot of this stuff that is not making sense in a basic concept, right? So, and I do think that there is, I often feel like there's a spiritual element, because even if we look at some of the mind control that we know the government was engaged in, right? The basic program of MK Ultra, and then all these subplots or sub programs that were based on that, and this the goal of figuring out how to manipulate human behavior. And even though we've been told that that program ended, I have to wonder what took its place and what elements are there in order to continue to manipulate human behavior at the very basic level, right? So I do think that part of that is algorithm based. And I know that not everybody believes in this, but I do believe in psychological and information warfare in being used as a method to make it difficult for us to discern what is going on, or in order to cause conflict with people that are on different sides of this paradigm. So there's a lot of different ways that we could look at the information scarcity. Maybe I'll call it that. Or, well, I think that's weird, because it's not information scarcity. There's a lot of information all over, but it's information quality information scarcity
Mhm.
from reliable sources, and then it's also using our discernment with figuring out what is factual in this current environment, and then what does that mean in the context of trying to figure out the bigger picture. So there's so many levels that these things could be looked at from, but even if we're just sticking to the facts, in as much as we have availability to the facts,
Mhm.
then it is a very cloudy picture, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Um, like the facts that are going on with Iran right now, it's very difficult to discern exactly what's happening on the ground. I do know one thing is I will look at like what Fox News, who's that Jesse Waters, kind of the replacement for old Tuck Tuck when he left. I'll look at clips and I'll go on to Fox News and I'll just see what they're saying. And they are 100% war propaganda. They are so far up the warmongers' asses, they could tickle their tonsils. That's what I'm seeing on there. And another thing that I'm seeing in especially these major news outlets is the degradation of the use of language. You know, when I was in college, they said that if you're writing to a mass audience, you write to a sixth grade level. Sports Illustrated. The language that they're using now is maybe third grade level. They're like, whoa, I read some line and it was along the lines of, well, Iran really got whooped today. And I'm like, dude, that sounds like something that my nephew, when he was like 8 years old, would say.
Yes.
This is the language that they're using, and it's the deliberate dumbing down of America that has occurred for a long time. Media is one of the sources. And now we're starting to see the final manifestations of that dumbing down. And the direct example is look at your CNNs, look at your Fox Newses, look at your MSNBCs, and step back and not concentrate so much on what's being said, but how it's being presented. It's
Yes.
pure entertainment meant and written to the lowest level that you possibly could. And when I step back and I see that, I can almost see a reflection of that in society. I have
100%.
friends.
100%. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, that's a really interesting topic, but I think that we see that in the speech of Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this is something that has been talked about quite a bit in different facets of, whatever media that you're, unless they're actively promoting the, President Trump, but especially in alt media, but a lot of people have pointed out, first of all, the way that he's delivering messages. So I think recently he put out like 50 truth posts
Oh,
in
jeez.
3 hours or something, like midnight. So the guy is giving sundowners vibe. Now, I happen to wonder, and I'm not saying this is fact, this is only speculation on my part, but if the man has handlers, why would they do that 50 tweets in 3 hours in the middle of the night? But so it's hard to tell if he is even the one that's doing the tweeting or the truthing or whatever you want to call it. But so not only is that giving unhinged vibes, and him saying like we're going to obliterate the entire civilization of Iran, that's giving unhinged vibes. But then the way that he speaks, and yes, it can be a funny joke if you're like, oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, whatever. But the point is that he speaks in very, very limited ways to people when he's giving a press conference. And this is something that has been discussed quite a bit once again. But President Obama was a very good orator. He had a very good stage presence. He was very
Yeah.
well spoken. He had decorum. And that was, again, like, not to say that I approve of presidents. I don't. But just if you're looking at what does that representation look like? So then you have that, and then you go from that to Donald Trump to Joe Biden to Donald Trump. And
Right.
then I think that Trump is appears much worse this time around. I mean, his speech is not it wasn't great last time, but I think that it has deteriorated even more this time around in the way that he's speaking. So not only is it incoherent, but it's very simple.
Mhm.
And the like what you were talking about as far as the loss of good language skills, good communication skills.
Mhm.
There's several accounts that I follow who are calling for a literary renaissance for that very reason, to try to reclaim good vocabulary and knowledge of classical works, and not letting the current environment get us away from that, and being educated, like trying to prevent or to stave off the last bit of idiocracy, because I feel like there is so much of that online, whether that's TikTok or X or whatever, of people being, they're cultivating their image, their content for views and clicks and engagement, whether that's rage baiting or doing like humiliating things for themselves or
Mhm.
other people, whatever that is. So it definitely feels like this idiocracy type vibe. And then something that they talk about it, that is in 1984 is newspeak,
Mhm.
double plus ungood, right? And then you hear other people talking about language, weaponized language, basically. So, what
Mhm.
is the kind of the overall movement towards that? So, if we can reclaim language and understanding, and etymology and things like that, then that would put us in a better position, at least as far as communicating and contextualizing and understanding what we're seeing. Sorry, I know that was a long one, but
No, no, you brought up a lot of valid points. Donald Trump on his first time around. Donald Trump is a very skilled orator. He is slipping, and people are like, "Oh, what do you mean he's skilled?" No, when you understand public speaking and what goes into it, I guess his style on his first run up was in a very vulgar tongue. Right? I'm one of you guys. I'm just gonna sit here, slap a chick's ass, drink a beer, maybe fart around the campfire. Very vulgar type of a language, and that resonated to his base because much of his base were the flyover people that have been forgotten about, and he was very skilled at what he did. Even though I find it deplorable, I find that when you are sitting in the most powerful office in the world, words matter. And one must be very careful and choose very wisely the words that they say on a public level because that public level is global. That public level can rise or kill markets, as we've seen recently. And now we went from that to the next step down to sleepy, creepy Uncle Joe, that everybody knew his mind was slipping in the elections, but they still let him go through. It was obvious to anybody who had eyes that could see the man was senile. Then they bring Orange Jesus back in. And now I think that I see his level of speech is degraded. It is if we are watching a reality comedy show. What I mean, and an example is when you see him in the White House talking about things that have very serious repercussions around the world, like the war that's going on. He's like, well, I don't know. We'll just plop a few of those, take a few of them out. Hey, Iran, this or that. Very almost incoherent at times language. And it's all a joke. Everybody around him, when you hear speeches lately, there's always laughing about serious matters. And I find that deplorable. I find it
agreed.
dangerous, but I also find it ironic in a way and symbolic of the times that we're living in now.
Yes.
I used a term earlier, the deliberate dumbing down of America, and that was a book by Charlotte Iserby. I'm sure you're
Right.
very aware of it.
Yes.
And that was written back in the 70s or 80s?
I think it was the 80s because she was part of Ronald Reagan's administration in the Department of Education. And I
Mhm.
think it was the 80s. And then we have School World Order,
Yeah.
John, that was
Mhm.
sort of her mentee and acolyte who is
Mhm.
continuing that work.
Yeah, he does good work. I've had him. I've interviewed him a few times. I've meet him in Acapulco. I think I did. I'm not sure though. Those weeks fly by real quick.
Yeah.
They're kind of a blur. But to the level of language that I'm seeing out of this office and this administration, like I said, it's deplorable and dangerous. You have Hegseth. You know, as a side note, little wind up. Everybody in his cabinet seems to be straight off of central casting. Straight off. You're either a hot looking babe or you're some dude with a big IMDb record, you know, and that goes from Cash Patel to Dan Bongino to Pete Hegseth. He's a pundit off of Fox. He's a
Yes.
actor. It's
Fox
not
Weekend host.
right. Fox. He didn't even get a regular. He got a weekend slot, and now he's up there saying very dangerous things in a very dangerous manner, in a very flippant manner to the world. And I'm looking at him, and I could tell he does not have a high intelligence. And he is narcissistic and at minimum sociopathic to where
Yes.
there is no repercussions in his mind about deceiving, lying, damaging, hurting, or killing. If it gets him ahead, those are fair game. And he doesn't have the intelligence of, say, like a Rumsfeld or Dick Cheney. God, I long back to the days when we had competent psychopaths who were ruthless psychopaths, but they're intelligent psychopaths. They knew what they were doing, even though if their doing was death and destruction. These assholes are like giving a chimpanzee a loaded AK-57 and saying, hey, Bonzo, here's how you pull the trigger. And then going, when everything starts blowing up, going, hey, I didn't shoot him. It was a damn chimp. Well, you gave him the gun. Shut him. Hey, that wasn't me. You know, are you insinuating this and blah, 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 blah. Hey, you like, oh my God. Here's an example of that. And I'll get off this tangent. I saw something on Cash Patel's recent appearance in the Senate. And God, I'm slipping on what it was. But his response to that, what was the FBI? I think it might have been Epstein files or something like that or whatever. His reply to the senator or whoever was conducting it, asking a question is, what about your $7,000 bar tab? Your bar tab. That was his retort to try to go after the bar tab. Well, the bar tab was for an event. Okay, all events have bar tabs, and $7,000 for a big event ain't bad. But that's the only
Right.
thing this effing moron had to reply. He's central casting, and I'll just go off that. But yeah, I think that we're heading for some troubling times because the moron psychopaths that are driving the ship don't know how to navigate.
Yeah, and I think that what you said, I echo that sentiment in that it is a loss of overall decorum. That's the thing, too. So I think even when you're dealing with somebody like what you're talking about, a Dick Cheney, a Condoleezza Rice, or whatever, there was a certain amount of statesmanship that
Right.
these people had. There was some, at least in speaking, at least in a professional manner. And again, this is not to speak on the deeds that they were involved in, like you said, with death and destruction. We know that. But as far as just the overall messaging, the overall, as you said, dumbing down of America, the lack of decorum, and I feel like we see it everywhere in a lot of different ways, in a lot of and I'm guilty of this too. But if you ever look back in the day, like in the 50s, people used to wear suits and dresses, and we really have come a long way from that. And not that I necessarily think you should wear a suit every day or anything like that, but I'm just saying that there has been a pretty significant change in a lot of our habits, from like hygiene and dress and our speaking and our education level and all those things. I feel like there has been a gradual downgrade to that, and not everybody, of course, but I think just in general that and that's something that you do see a little bit more. Or I saw one of the accounts that I was telling you about that is trying to emphasize the importance of reading, and not just book talk, as they call it, but some of the more challenging, more works of import that people are saying that if you're out in public reading, that you're doing performative reading and things like that. So what that is shaming people for
Yeah.
reading a book, for trying to educate themselves, or to try to do something outside of being on a screen. And I find it to be a very weird environment in that way. And I think that it is reflected and reflected back to us in these people that are the public leaders, such
Yeah.
as Donald Trump. Now, I agree with you that he is very good at his speaking, like the way that he speaks to people in order to, because it's the art of the deal, right? I mean, he is that guy. He's good at that. He was a performer when he was on The Apprentice. But as far as like his level of speaking, it's not good.
No.
And then we do have people that, like you had said, are represented and they appear to be very subpar intelligence, such as Pete Hegseth. And then you have this other 1984 aspect to this, which is changing from the Department of Defense to the Department of War and the head of war, and then referring to soldiers in I forget the phrase that he used, but it was something else. And that's one of the things that I want to point out. Not that I have cracked this code at all, but when we were talking about this off stage, like, what are the narratives that we're seeing? What phrases are we seeing that are changing kind of like previously what we would see? So soldier to what he's calling them, like war fighters, I believe is the correct thing. So like these subtle things, what does that do for the overall messaging? And some of this stuff I think is subliminal. Not that I'm a subliminal messaging expert or anything like that, but I am very curious about tie that in with algorithmic manipulation, and then the possibility of human behavior manipulation from the previous studies and the work that had been done in that way, to like neuro-linguistic programming and subliminal messaging. Like, what does that do? I don't have an answer, but I have questions.
I have a lot of questions. What it does is it manipulates the minds of the public and the people that are being exposed to it. And an easy tool to really combat that, simply learn about it. Simply learn that it exists and how it works. Great example is Propaganda, the book that Edward Bernays wrote in the 20s and 30s. And it happened to me, once I read it and I understood the technology behind it, then I saw it everywhere. It's like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you're driving around, you see that same model everywhere. You see it everywhere. And then two, by understanding the techniques that were being used against me, it stopped working because I knew, oh, that's that technique. Oh, okay, that's that technique that they talked about. It goes with media today. People think that the free Google app is there for their convenience and it's there to make them a better person, when it's completely opposite. It's technology that's being used to brainwash, manipulate, and control the mind, speech, and actions of the people being exposed to it. And if you don't know at a basic level that you're being exposed to it, you have no way of combating against it. And in that context, that's a very, very, very powerful tool. One of the
Yes.
strongest tools in warfare right now is the battle of the mind. Sun Tzu, I believe, said 90% of all war is psychological. And that's what's happening now. I have a friend, okay, very dear friend, and I call him my naive Republican brother, and he
Yes, I've
calls
heard you
me
talk about him before.
my conspiracy brother. We love each other, right? But he's totally down to Donald Trump, Fox News. And he's all, yeah, Fox is going to be one of the greatest presidents, and I'm all down with this, and we should have gone and done this earlier, and we're going to feel a little bit of pain for the long-term gain. And I keep telling him, dude, you're being deceived. And he's like, yeah, and you're crazy. You're crazy, Dave. You and your chemtrails. That's pure conspiracy theory. Because if that was the case, and he told me this one time, if the chemtrails, if that was the case, then it would be all over the media. And why is it not on the media? Yeah. So then you look at someone like him who's very pro-Trump MAGA. Then you look at the other side of the spectrum. The purple hair got 20 piercings, totally on the autistic LGBTQ twin spirited person being crafted by the propaganda that they're under. And they're the ones that go out there and to stop the world and to stop the big bad oil and to do this and the rich white republic, right? Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to go out and take a Van Gogh, sneak into the art museum and throw paint on it. Or the brilliant one that I love of those don't stop oil people, I'm using them as an example because they're so easy, is those morons that go out in the middle of traffic and take a bunch of epoxy glue on their hand and they glue it to the pavement. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They didn't think that, oh, your hand's now permanently adhered to that. And so that chunk of asphalt is going to have to be cut out. And you're probably going to have lifelong damage because of that. Those morons. And it's being used at such a granular level. I like to view things in terms of wheels, hubs, and spokes. You have this wheel of propaganda and you have so many spokes and they're all leading to that hub, and that hub is mind control. And I just touched a couple of those, but it goes all the way around the wheel, and there's a lot of those things that are there. So it's not surprising that we're in a war with Iran. Most people in America, right, have no concern. A lot of them support it. Others don't give a rat's ass. And part of that apathy, if you will, about what's happening that can, in an instant, drastically change and ruin everybody's lives, is Americans have this hubris that war has never happened on our shores. 1812, we've had a little skirmish, but no, we've never had devastation on our shores. Nothing in World War II like Europe did, or Asia did. World War I, World War II, Korean conflicts. Currently, what's going on in Gaza and across the Middle East, where you're having millions of people being injured, displaced, and killed because it never happens over here. That is a dangerous apathy to have because they don't understand that we're in a modern fifth generation warfare. And what we're doing overseas can, and if we continue, most likely will be done here.
Yeah, I definitely think that that is something that you touched on. A good point is that a lot of people do feel very insulated from the possibility. Yes, we did have 9/11, we did have Pearl Harbor, but overall, Yes, we have been very unscathed by a lot of the devastation that you're talking about that is taking place currently or has over the last many decades. And I do wonder, I don't proclaim to know, but I do wonder what level of manipulation we're exposed to. So not only from the algorithm, but also from just being like where we currently are in alt media, or where like what are even the lines, right? I think that there are definitely people that are considered alt media that are these really big accounts, and you can see certain narratives coming from them. But then whenever it comes to like the day-to-day stuff, I think it's really difficult to know what what are we being manipulated about. And then when we go back to like NLP or subliminal messaging or, newspeak or whatever that is, I think it's really hard, even for us, even if we know that there is an effort to manipulate us, it's difficult to discern what that manipulation even is. So it's like being aware of manipulation and the possibility for that and trying to be aware of propaganda. but but there's so many brilliant ways to deliver that propaganda, I think, or manipulation, or however you want to describe that, that it makes it very difficult to actually discern what's going on, which kind of circles back to where we started with this Iran conflict. And I do have a couple things I want to get into in
Yeah,
regards to that. But it's just a weird time. So we had talked about what exactly is going on there, and I have a video that I want to play, and I'm just going to play a couple of minutes before. And Dave and I were talking about this beforehand, so this is not. I have a couple of things from Judge Napolitano. It's not because I am endorsing everything that he says or does, or the people that are on the show, or anything like that, but I find that to be, for me, a source of a different variety of speakers talking on various topics of what we're seeing transpire geopolitically. And it can at least give you a good starting point if you want to start searching and figuring out a little bit of the stuff that Dave and I were talking about, like some different perspectives and news stories of what is actually going on. And I'll give you an example. He has Jeffrey Sachs on his show quite often, and he's good friends with Jeffrey Sachs. Now, I find Jeffrey Sachs to be extremely well-spoken. He seems like he's very, a very mild or moderate personality. He seems very friendly, intellectual, all of these things. But I have also noticed some messaging as far as like, in regards to the relationship with China and the potential of us starting to import Chinese electric vehicles here and things like that. I'm not saying that proves anything at all. It's just something that sticks out to me is like, okay, so Jeffrey Sachs is he works in China a lot. He has relationships with them. And then he's talking to us about Chinese electric cars. Just a note for something later. So all that to say, I'm not endorsing anybody, but they are just talking about and bringing up points that I find to be topical and interesting in regards to what's happening in Iran. So without further ado, I'm going to play this and hope that our sound is working, and we'll see.
That people will have to tolerate for the time being.
Right. Is the war still on?
It's difficult to say. I think that logically speaking, we shouldn't have the war continue because the United States has too many difficulties, too many problems. I think that it would also harm the summit between Trump and President Xi in China. But since the Israelis have huge influence and the Zionist lobby is very powerful in the United States, the belief here is that we could be moving towards a hot war in the near future. So if it was basically between Iran and the United States, I think there would be no chance of war. But because of the Netanyahu factor and so on, I think that the chance of war is not low.
I'm going to ask you to predict the future. What happens if Trump
Okay, so what are your thoughts on that, Dave? Because I thought that that was a good. This is, Judge Napolitano speaking with oh my god, I had his name, Mohammed Morandi, professor. Okay, so
Mhm.
he's in Tehran, and he's asking him, "Are we at war?" And that goes back to the question that we ask: what is actually going on? Are we actually at war right now, or are we in this stalemate? So I thought that he addressed it well. And my understanding, interpretation of what he's saying is that kind of not, but we're still on that line, this like very close precipice. And of course, he's talking about the Zionist influence on the Trump administration and people like Marion Adelson, who donated huge amounts of money to Trump's presidency. I think I could be wrong, maybe over $1 billion or something like that. So these people are very powerful lobbyists. So I think that he answered the question, though. So we're not really at war right now, but we could be very close to that, especially if the pressure from the Zionist lobby continues. What are your thoughts?
I think that our government is not our government anymore. It is, or it has been, bought and paid for by the country of Israel. And Netanyahu is commanding President Trump. Symbolism is a very important thing, especially in diplomacy. Do you remember that meeting a while ago when Netanyahu brought his dirty laundry with him on the plane for the White House to clean? That is symbolic. And in the meeting with Netanyahu, Trump pulled out his chair for him and pushed it back in.
Yes.
Something that the average person wouldn't give two shakes, but in the world of diplomacy, that is a signal. That is very similar to over in England bowing to the Queen. You are therefore, by doing it, saying you have authority over me. And here is my gesture to show that.
Right.
So,
And really quick, just to add to that, that was something that there was a meeting with Donald Trump and the Chinese, what do they call it? The Chinese delegate, maybe. So he had gone to China and he had a meeting and he was greeted not by Xi Jinping.
yeah.
And they were discussing on Napolitano's show. That is a message. So you're right that there's very subtle. I mean, maybe we don't think that they're subtle, but they're kind of subtle. They may not seem
Subtle.
like a big deal, but they do send a message and they are symbolic. Go ahead.
Yeah. And going back to the war with Iran, these wars that we've been having for, God knows, since 9/11 have been done, in my opinion, in my observation, on behalf of Israel. And what's happening now is clean cut because of Israel. Israel, as in Netanyahu so braggly said, we now have control over a superpower. So the decision to go to war or not to go to war really isn't lying with Orange Jesus, Trump. He's just playing his role as the actor that he is. And
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you
Nope,
feel
go
like that he is that it's simply the Zionist lobby, that is really who he, like Netanyahu, these donors such as Miriam Adelson and that crowd, that is who he is beholden to in this case?
I think that they're handlers. But I think there's a lot more outside influences in the shadows that are really pulling the strings. Because even Adelson, she's got a lot of money. Even Bibi Netanyahu, he's got a lot of power. But they're not even pulling the strings. Everybody has a boss. Everybody. I remember the first Trump election, the big thing that people were saying is, he's a billionaire. He's not for sale. Oh, really now? Okay. You realize he has a boss now, don't you? Oh no, he's a billionaire. Oh, really? Now it would be my response. We're seeing it now. So, do I hold hope that the world will come to their senses and back off now and kind of say, hey, we need to have some negotiations. We need to calm down. Yeah, you get this, I get that. Things ain't going to be the same, but let's put a little bit of sanity into this situation. I hold very little hope, just like Judges Napolitano's guest. The chances for peace are low. Chances for war are very high.
Yes, I agree with that. And I just got something from one of my friends about the dirty laundry. So let's see what this says. Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and his wife Sarah have been accused of bringing suitcases of dirty laundry on state visits to the U.S., according to U.S. officials and a report in the Washington Post. They allegedly used state visits to have their soiled clothes cleaned free of charge by the White House staff. White House hospitality permits basic dry cleaning and laundry services for visiting foreign dignitaries. Anonymous officials reported that the Netanyahus were uniquely known for bringing actual suitcases specifically filled with dirty clothing on multiple trips. According to the coverage from the Times of Israel, Israeli officials have fiercely denied these allegations, dismissing them as absurd and intended to distract from diplomatic achievements. So,
yeah. And what's the motto of the Mossad? Through deception, we shall raise or wage war. Oh, I gotta find that.
Okay. And while you do that, while you pull that up, there's something that I wanted to read a quote from another, and I have a clip from Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson that was also in The Judge, but he said something very interesting, and this is not necessarily about what we're seeing in Iran, but it is about this lawlessness that we're seeing from the United States government or the Trump administration. So while you're pulling that up, Dave, I'm going to read this.
Well, I found it really quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Mossad's motto is, for want of a strategy, an enemy falls, but victory comes with much planning. Their former, historically well-known motto translates to, quote, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. Let me ask you a quick question there. Who's the God of lies, Ashley, according to Christian and Hebrewic religion? Huh?
That would be the devil himself, would it not?
Yeah. And that's their big motto of the government. Oh, I think a little bit of Ezekiel action is going to be coming down on that country, because I don't think that they are adhering to the tenets of the Hebrewic or Israelite religion, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I definitely am not super familiar with that. I mean, obviously, I am somewhat familiar, but not that I've done a ton of deep diving into the Jewish faith. And my understanding is that there's there's a lot of different sects to that as well. And so I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do think that at the very least that there is a connection with deception to, like, what we talked about, which the as far as like Sun Tzu, in order to try to win the war without ever firing a shot, you do have information in order to do that. And then of course it also aligns with I forget the person that was in the CIA that made the statement, but about, we'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American public believes is false. So all that to say, it is very difficult to discern exactly what's going on here. But to circle back to the Iran conflict, so it appears that we're not actively engaged in war, but we are in this very, very close situation that it could kind of go that way. And then, like what he was talking about, the fact that he believes that the Zionist lobby is actively pushing for continued war with Iran. Now, I want to get into some of the narratives that we have seen being discussed in regards to this particular conflict. But before I do that, just to speak to the overall situation, I feel like the messaging that we're getting, and maybe this is just me, like in my where I'm at in the news and things like that I consume as far as content, but it feels like chaos. And so this is a quote from Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson on Judge Napolitano, and I'm not going to play this part, but I am going to play something from him discussing empires.
Okay.
But he said from the September the 2nd of 2025 to present, we've conducted 55 lethal military strikes on boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific. No warning shot, no boarding, no arrest, no trial, just death. 194 people dead, no accounting to Congress or the people the government had, or no accounting to Congress or the people. No account. I'm sorry. The government has not publicly ID'd any of them, and the Department of Justice document that presents its legal argument for this being legal is secret. So this is giving, you know, it's scary. It's not only chaos vibes, it's giving brown shirt vibes. It's giving you know, Gestapo vibes, or Gestapo, however you say that. And this feeling of lawlessness, and then pairing that with feeling like we're on the precipice of war, even if the motivations are the Zionist lobby or the other people that are in control that we don't know about, whatever that is, it's just this feeling of like what we were talking about a little bit of unease about what is transpiring. And then there's a lot of other things that are happening in the world that pair with that. But I just thought that that was a really symbolic quote for not only the ships that they've been blowing up for no reason in the Caribbean and the Pacific, but for what other, this very reckless lawlessness that we're seeing from them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in regards to what's going on in the Caribbean and out on the seas, we are now openly engaging in what can be termed piracy. We are taking over tankers and ships of foreign nations under foreign flags and saying, it's ours now, redirecting them and offshoring their cargo. That's piracy. What's going on in the Caribbean with 50 deadly lethal strikes on those, quote, drug boats. All right. There is no evidence that points toward their shipping drugs. Ain't
None
saying
at
they weren't.
all.
Ain't saying they weren't. Right. But you have no evidence. And you're also dealing with open bow boats that if you're going to ship something you need to keep dry, you put it in barrels. All right. The big blue barrels. And so who's to say that that barrel wasn't full of fish and flour
100%.
as opposed to cocaine?
And just to tie that in with what you're talking about, Sean, I feel like when in reference to places like Guantanamo Bay, for example, where people are being held, tortured, like incredibly horrific things that were done to people, and they never got a trial. We have no idea. They're simply merely classified as being a terrorist. By who? We never saw any documentation or any evidence that they did anything at all. We have no idea. And there's no accountability for that. And to this day, are people still there? My understanding that it is not closed down. So these things are a very scary precedent. And then, of course, pairing it with what we're currently seeing in regards to the Iran war or the Iran conflict, or however you want to phrase that, it's a very strange time. And I think that it makes it more difficult, as this whole episode has really been about, is figuring out what is actually happening.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen too much in the time we're going to be here, but there's a lot of questions to be answered. You brought up another good point. You brought up the idea of chaos. It feels like they're having everything's getting more and more chaotic. That's by plan, in my opinion. There's something called chaos magic. And I'm not versed in it, but I know it exists and I know people practice it. To take it to a more secular type of a viewpoint, if you have an enemy and you want to conquer that enemy, and you can cause complete chaos within the ranks, then use narrative management and propaganda and other things to get them to fight against each other. Means you pretty much weakened or taken over that country without firing a shot. Now you want to go and conquer this enemy. If they're all fighting amongst themselves and it's chaotic and everything like this, you can come in and just wipe them out. Now, there's an old saying, order out of chaos. And there's also another thing is the phoenix, the rise of the phoenix from the ashes. It's the same concept.
Right. The death and the death and rebirth cycle of X, Y, and Z.
And what I've seen for a long time is that America, the United States, has traditionally been a stalwart, a bulkhead against this globalist plan. That's kind of the big thing they have to knock out. And by creating chaos, by splitting us at every level that we can, they can take us over. Now, America is not just going to willfully say, hey, I'm giving my national sovereignty over to a supranational governing body. Okay. But if there's enough chaos in the streets, if people are going hungry, people are dying, those same people that were against giving up the national sovereignty will gladly say, give me my food, give me my chip, end the pain. Out of the phoenix, out of the ashes, the phoenix will rise. And that's this globalist sick in their utopian minds, utopia for them. But reality, it is going to be the most horrific type of government structure that's ever been created. In their words, they want to create a neo-feudal technocratic system where they live in their Elysian palaces. They keep enough of us around in the mines to get their resources and their needs, and then they wipe the rest of us out. I think we've seen depopulation now being implemented in real time with the COVID, the shots, that right there, the millions and millions of people around the world that have died because of that, the genetic damage that has been done, which will be passed. Let me say, I'm not a scientist, has the great potential of being passed down to future generations.
Yeah, there's definitely concerns as far as an epigenetic perspective from the toxins that we're exposed to currently and the trauma. That's the other thing. So many events that we have experienced are these mass trauma events, and I do believe that those things are impactful. So one of the ways that we can fight back is being as healthy as we can and being, as aware as we can. But I definitely think that no matter where you stand on that, the speed with which it was developed was a lot faster than what we would have what we have seen as far as like other injections and things like that go. But not only that, there's a lot of as far as like a ton of people being on SSRIs and things like that are known and documented in order to affect the sex drive and the libido of people. And then we see it also the introduction of screens, particularly to people that you may call, I don't know, this may sound creepy, but like mating age, you know what I mean? Like people in their young 20s that would be meeting each other and maybe settling down, starting a family. Like there's less of that interaction because of screens, less dating. Anyway, so there's a lot of these things that have the potential to affect the population. And we do hear, we've gotten messaging that there's too many people on the earth. And then we're getting messages that the birth rate is declining. And it certainly seems like that's the case, but who really knows? But to get back to what you're saying as far as chaos, I also want to introduce that is a Machiavellian principle from the philosophy side of things, that chaos is supposedly to relate this to some nerd stuff, in the books A Song of Ice and Fire, which is what the show Game of Thrones was based on, there is a character known as Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger, and he is a chaos agent. And one of the things that he says is chaos is a ladder. So again, not that I'm pointing to hardcore evidence for that, but just that it is a possibility that chaos is being used for some certain purpose, whatever that may be.
Oh, yeah.
And
doubt.
whether that is bringing in the mystical aspect of like chaos magic, or if it's simply to keep people confused, or perhaps for people to be distracted from, things that are transpiring. I don't know, but just to say that it is a well-known concept of Machiavellian philosophy in order to cultivate chaos.
Yeah, and we're seeing it in real time, and it's only increasing, and it's only going to increase more and more. Yeah, I want to come back to, let's go bring this back to Iran supply chain, Strait of Hormuz. You brought up a good point. You said SSRIs. Most of our drugs and our SSRIs are made overseas. They're petrochemical drugs, which means that the precursors come from the petrochemical industry. And that's being strangled right now in the Straits of Hormuz. A huge percentage, and I should look it up, of the American public are on SSRIs. Let me see. I'm going to percent. Bear with me just a second.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay,
And
it says here, it's just a quick, and this is just SSRI, so you're not talking about your other psychotropics. As of early 2026, approximately 16.6% of American adults report taking antidepressant medications. According to a 50-state survey, other estimates suggest up to 20% of the population may be on antidepressants, with use higher amongst women and non-Hispanic whites. Okay, so let's take that 20% of our population are on these drugs. These drugs, the withdrawals of these are extreme and severe. People lose their S, if you will, coming off of these. They create, in some cases, I've heard reports of permanent brain rewiring, if you will.
yes,
Now, look at this scenario. You want to create chaos, right? Cut off that supply to America and watch 20% of the people freak out. Freak out.
it is a
1% of the
fact.
population.
It is an absolute fact that getting off of an SSRI, especially if you've been on it for a long time, is very, very difficult. And that
Yes.
is even if you follow a doctor's guidance. You can have, so SSRIs in and of themselves can create a numbing feeling. Now, not everybody, but people that have them, you can have this sensation of feeling numb. You can have a loss of joy, a loss of interest in your relationships. It's truly like a numbing type effect. And then it can cause, there's a good amount of people that report the side effect of having sexual dysfunction and not being capable of sexual arousal, sexual relationships with people at all anymore. Some of that damage is permanent. That's not with everyone, but it is one of the things that does occasionally happen. And then the other factor is if you go cold turkey, it is very, very damaging. So not only does it affect your mental and emotional state, physically, it makes you feel horrible. There's something that a lot of people will describe as brain zaps, a zapping type feeling, which is if you are not, weaning down on that medication enough, you literally will feel like you're getting zapped in your brain.
Yeah.
And so 100%, this is a concern in regards to the supply chain. I pray that doesn't happen because a large percent of people are on SSRIs. But it is something that is, it would be absolutely dreadful. It would be terrible, as you were saying, if that were to be cut off and there was some sort of a cold turkey situation. It absolutely would be terrible. And I think these things are not, I am not giving medical advice at all. I'm not condemning anyone. If you're taking an SSRI, I have my own personal opinion, my own personal experience with them. But I'm just saying that they can be difficult to get off of, fact. And if there were a sudden shortage, that would be catastrophic, I believe, because of the difficulty of stopping them cold turkey.
Yeah. They have black box warnings on them. And those are the most extreme warnings that they can put on a medication. That's openly, they say these can cause suicidal tendencies, violent tendencies, self-harm. And just to throw another log on the fire on this SSRIs, just to prove how dangerous these are, and not just the withdrawals, but virtually every of the mass school shooters that we've had and the mass shooters have either been on them or withdrawing from them. That is a common thread. Now, you never heard it on the media. You never heard our politicians talking about it. Mum's word. Tell you what, if it was meth that all those people were on, there would be an instant war claimed on meth. But when it's the pharmaceuticals who fund the politicians and who fund the media, crickets.
Yeah, there's definitely, it gets weird with and that's part of the reason that so many people are distrustful, because it's difficult to get real true information or to have these very open conversations about what are the actual side effects and the studies that are associated with them. And it feels very hard to get real information on that. So a lot of what I know is anecdotal conversations with people, and then digging into, groups out there of people that are talking about the sexual dysfunction that they have had as a result of this medication, things like that. So, but just to bring that back again to the Iran issue, supply chain issues, supply chain struggles, shortages, whatever you want to say, that is absolutely something that, even though we're in this like frozen or non-conflict conflict with them at the moment, that potentially like we're on this precipice, but not quite over, haven't fully crossed the Rubicon.
Right.
The shipping troubles are still there, because my understanding, at least from what I have seen, is that Iran is fully in control of the Strait of Hormuz, that they are charging tolls or tax or whatever you want to say in order for people to be able to cross there. And then some other things that I've seen is that there are some ships that are being like taken over or fired upon from other countries. I mean, it's really a mess, but my understanding is that Iran has control of that, and that is a huge part of making all this go round, basically the entire worldwide shipping chain. And another thing is that Ghostart had told me about a journalist, I think it's Richard Medhurst, Ghostart, if you're still listening, but and he had put out a video. Now, John Brissom did say that this guy is coming at it from like a pro BRICS standpoint, so that's sort of his bias. But he was essentially saying that the United States is setting up this situation in order to not only put the screws to Europe and charge them, like 10 times their previous price for natural gas, but also to set that same type of situation up with China and force their hand about where they're buying their natural gas from. So it's really, there's so many moving pieces to this. And like you were talking about how things that you look at them like a wheel and a spoke, but this is like clockwork, right? So there's so many wheels and spokes and moving pieces here that it's very difficult to know what's going on. So it's crazy. Now, one thing that I wanted to play, because this is a theme that's coming up, right? We're celebrating 250 years as America and our empire. And I think that my friend Franco, Angry Tiger, was saying that this is like end of empire behavior. And I agree with that, and maybe you'll agree as well. So I'm going to show this from Lawrence Wilkerson again, and this is kind of his conversation. So it's basically what he's commenting on is perpetuating the forever war. We know that in these sayings that we often hear that may sound kind of cliche now, but I don't tend to think so, because from an anti-war perspective, I think if you may have some basic cliches that can speak to the horrors of war, such as war is the health of the state, the first casualty of war is the truth, war is hell, war is a racket, things like that, I think that they all are true. But let me show you this and see what you think.
Many people will argue, myself included, I've written a paper on this. Empires normally do not win in the traditional sense. Douglas MacArthur, there is no substitute for victory. Go to hell, Doug. That's not what empires do. Empires simply hold the world at bay and fulfill their monetary, economic, and other interests, mercenary interests. And that's all you can expect. And you fuel the complex that keeps those wars going on, because that's what you want to do. You want to be constantly at war, but you don't want anyone to defeat you in the traditional sense. So it's not really a metric you can use to judge the empire by, winning or losing wars. It's no longer consequential in the scheme of things for Rome.
But the empire has not achieved any of its stated goals.
I thought that that was really, I don't know. I thought that it was really beautifully said. I think that that's something worth repeating, is what Lawrence Wilkerson was saying, because I think it frames everything. So one other thing that I want to get into, and I'm not sure how you are on time, Dave, but
I got a little bit left.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to get into is the narratives that we have been seeing. Okay. And I'm going to circle back to that. But what he's saying is, like, it doesn't matter. That Judge Knapp went on to say, but we haven't achieved any of the stated goals, supposedly, the reasoning for this entire conflict. And he's saying it doesn't matter, because what you're doing is propping up the empire, because the empire is holding the entire world hostage in a way. And because it's such a huge world stage player, that's really, in a way, what is happening. I feel like that's an accurate description of that. And speaking of America in terms of an empire or a crumbling empire, I just thought that was very well and beautifully said. And it's actually really sad that that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah, I do think that we are at the end of empire, and it can be even taken back into the idea of chaos. The America being the stalwart, the bulwark against the globalist agenda. If we collapse, the world will collapse. It'll throw us, the whole globe, into global chaos. And in that chaos, out of that will come the order. And the globalists will now have an advantage, because they're like, hey, there's no more sovereign countries. That has failed. But we have a method that's worked. It's called globalism. We're all going to be one kumbaya globe. And since we don't have nations, we have nobody to fight against, and of course, we get rid of all of the nuclear weapons and everything like that. And everybody turn in your weapons, because we're moving into a world of peace out of the order. Another lie from the tablecloth. But what he talked about at the end of empire, I think we're starting to see now. If you look at the life cycle of an empire, all empires have certain traits at certain times, certain characteristics. And I think that we're getting to that point where we're starting to see a lot of those characteristics. You have leaders who don't care, they're buffoons. You have the nation's treasury squandered on war. You become unable to defend your borders. You're overrun by, say, migrants or immigrants. Check, check, check. All these boxes are checking off on that life or the end of an empire in that life cycle type of a model. And I hope that we can pull through this. I really do, Ashley. I really hope in about 5 years I can look back and laugh at myself right now. Watch this podcast and I could laugh at myself and, man, dude, what were you thinking? Such a conspiracy theorist. I guess your naive Republican brother was right, Dave. You really are a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a valid question of, and you and I were talking about this before, like, what are we actually going to see? You know, that's when we're really going to know if, like, oh, I was silly in my speculation or in my hyperbole or in my conspiracy theory or whatever was transpiring there. But you know, and I do want to say that this is something that I have wondered about because I do have friends in kind of in the alt media that address the like the migrant situation,
Mhm.
and basically that this could have been done from a responsible way, you know, to allow people to come to this country because it is natural for people
Well, it's
to.
vital for the health. Immigration is a vital of our health.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go on,
No,
please.
yeah, exactly. That it is important, but the way that this has been done has been irresponsible, and it
Mhm.
is set up also. The other thing is that we've gotten so much spin on that conversation from especially, like, I guess, the far right, and I truly believe that there's a lot of hyperbole there because when I look around, like, North Carolina is a pretty integrated state in that we have I would say, well, there's people here from all over for sure, but I would say the big 3 are going to be white, black, and Mexican. So we have a lot of, like, it's a very integrated state and it's fine. It works well, right? It
Yeah.
seems to work out very, very well. So that there's a way to go about this responsibly that is responsible for everyone involved. And then, of course, like from the liberty perspective or like the Ron Paul libertarian perspective, then that gets into like government handouts and things like that. It's a whole other question. But anyway, I do think that the other things like we're talking about as far as the financial bankruptcy that it appears that we're trending towards, and
Right.
certainly the state that we're seeing of our government, it and I know that there's many instances of this like from the get-go basically, but of this just complete disregarding of what are supposed to be the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, like people's freedom of speech, like all these things. We're seeing moves being made that appear to be targeting those specific rights and however that comes up. So, one of the things that I wanted to bring up before we wrap up
Mhm.
the show is what I have found very interesting. In regards to the conflict in Iran, we have seen a lot of different narratives. So, one thing that we didn't have going into this conversation is an idea of what the hell is going on.
Right.
That's me. We discussed that. We're on the same page. Like, we don't really know. Okay. What we have seen, a piece of information or a phrase that I have seen uttered by several different people, and I would ask that other people keep their eyes peeled for this and think about this and let me know if you saw this before or if this is sort of like a new thread, because one of the things that we're talking about is the possibility of or the like some of the potential outcomes for the conflict that we're seeing. Is this a push to bring BRICS really to the forefront? that would only be speculation. I don't know. I'm not a military strategist or anything like that, but I'm just saying, could that be something that's transpiring? And I think it's possible. And the reason I'm saying that is because one of the bullet points or the threads or the talking points that I've seen reiterated from several different people in slightly different ways is we've created a superpower. So I want people to be on the lookout for hearing that, and just think about if you have been hearing that before, because I think we thought of Iran as inconsequential, just another country in the Middle East that was described as essentially being the bad guy. And now they're in a position of controlling the Strait of Hormuz. They supposedly are. Now, again, this is speculation and things that I've heard, but they are in the catbird seat as far as their munitions and their protection of their munitions due to the geography of the entire country. And that, yes, they are suffering somewhat financially because of the infrastructure that has been destroyed in their country, but overall they're actually doing a good, they're doing well, and they're in a position of power. And that was something that Professor Mamdani was, or not Mamdani, I'm sorry, Morandi was discussing earlier. He said that he thought that Iran was actually in a better position currently than at the beginning of this conflict. So I found that to be interesting. And we know that they are, at least we're told that they're getting tolls and things like that from people that are passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and that they have a good working relationship with China. They have a good working relationship with Russia. And so they are actually maybe making some money. They feel secure in their geography. And there is, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, Dave, but I just wanted to point out the fact of that narrative. And then the other thing, there was an article that was, we're not going to have time to get into the whole thing. Maybe some other point if we decide to do like part 3 of this conversation. Because part 1 was my conversation over on Dave's channel, the Thirdrail, a few weeks ago. But this article is called Checkmate in Iran, and this was put out by The Atlantic, and the author was Robert Kagan. And I'm going to bring this up really quick.
Yeah, I have it pulled up as well.
Okay, perfect.
So I can follow
So
along.
I'm going to first, before we get into that, I'm going to bring up his wiki, okay? Because I really wasn't familiar with Robert Kagan, but maybe some people are out there. But if you're not, then here's a little summary. So he is a neocon scholar. This is from the basic Wikipedia page, okay? He's a U.S. foreign policy analyst and commentator, and a leading advocate of liberal internationalism, which I think that tie that in with being a neocon. A co-founder of the Neoconservative Project for the New American Century, he's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. So he has been a foreign policy advisor to Republican presidential candidates as well as Democratic administrations via the Foreign Affairs Policy Board. And he wrote a monthly column on world affairs for the Washington Post. And he ended up leaving the Republican Party due to the party's nomination of Donald Trump, and he endorsed Hillary Clinton. But the other interesting tie-in for this guy is that he is Victoria Nuland's husband.
Oh, yes. The lady that was in charge that was she the one that handpicked the government of Ukraine after the 2014 Maidan coup?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
She was intimately involved in the goings-on in Ukraine, in that coup, regime change, whatever that is. So this is who we're dealing with.
Well, he's
and then
go
ahead.
I believe, and I just recently heard this, that neoconservatism basically came out of the Trotsky philosophy. They're basically followers of Trotsky. What's that tell you? Well,
Yeah,
you're the
and I
conservatives standing up for the Constitution, supposedly, but yet your neoconservatism philosophy stem from Trotsky.
right, and I think it kind of ties in with the the old adage that no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain, and that's especially true when you're dealing with neocons. I mean, these people have never met a war that they didn't love. They've never met a soldier that they were not willing to sacrifice in order to facilitate that war, and however, whatever they end up benefiting from. But that's the kind of guy that we're dealing with. And so what I wanted to bring out, I'm not even going to
Yeah.
read the whole thing, but I just wanted to tell people about this article that, let me bring it up here. That wrong one, sorry. Okay, so I want to take it to the top here. And this is, again, Checkmate in Iran by Robert Kagan. Washington can't reverse or control the consequences of losing this war. So he starts out to say, it's hard to think of a time when the United States suffered a total defeat in a conflict, which is complete, just my conjecture here, but that's nonsense. No, it's not hard. A setback so decisive that the strategic loss could be neither repaired nor ignored. The calamitous losses suffered at Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, and throughout the Western Pacific in the first months of World War II were eventually reversed. The defeats in Vietnam and Afghanistan were costly, but did not do lasting damage to America's overall position in the world because they were far from the main theaters of global competition. The initial failure in Iraq was mitigated by a shift in strategy that ultimately left Iraq relatively stable and unthreatening to its neighbors and kept the United States dominant in the region. So this is a guy who's kind of coming at it at this angle that, oh, like this particular conflict has been a disaster, but oh, like Afghanistan and Vietnam and Iraq, those weren't really that bad because of X, Y, and Z, but this one is. And so I find it interesting, like, why, yes, this guy was not a fan of Trump, but why this article? Why are we saying that we have totally lost when it doesn't feel like that's exactly the case? What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, you have to understand where this guy comes from. He's a total hardcore globalist. I mean, he's part of the PNAC, and that speaks millions to me. And of course, they want chaos. They want this country to fall. These are the globalists. These are the Council of Foreign Relations. These are the neocons, the Trotskyites, if you will. So what he's saying in here, or the point that he's making from their standpoint, well, yeah, we don't want America around no more. They're just getting in the way of our agendas. So I was kind of going over it, and I did kind of a summary on the article there. Hold on, I just had something. I'm looking for this. But he also said that, those other ones, we got wars, but hey, they're not that big of a deal. But this one is. Could be one of two
Right.
things. It's more war propaganda scaring, or he could have a very valid point. For one, this now involves the oil and energy production for the globe that they're systematically destroying both sides. We take out Iran's refineries, they take out the UAE's and everybody else's. There's a lot more seriousness with this war than there was Afghanistan. Plus, this war also has a potential of leaving or exceeding the regional war state and actually going to a global war. Afghanistan, ain't nobody going to be lighting off the world on Afghanistan. Pain in the ass, yeah. Just business as usual. This, baby doll, this is a whole different story. Because now we're threatening the energy supply of the world, and they have strong diplomatic ties between Iran and China. Or no, sorry, not Iran, China, but Russia and China.
Yes. BRICS,
And
right? I
right.
mean,
And
very powerful. Yeah.
you can bet your bottom dollar there's a lot of backdoor deals going on about now between those three. And if it gets to the point that they're like, yeah, screw America, it's like a tag team match. Oh, Russia just jumped in. Uh-oh. Oh, hey, China just jumped in. Uh-oh. Now, pretty much the Middle East is all on their side because they've been actually cutting deals for these guys. And we're all now going global. So we're going to really just wipe out all your naval ships over there in America. And, oh, by the way, welcome to the world of drone warfare. hypersonic missiles. It's
Yes.
going to rain down on the United States. And if that ever happens, people will lose it because we have no experience in that type of environment. Unlike the Middle East, where they're very well versed in that environment, if that makes sense.
Yes. And one thing that I do want to point out in regards to the drone warfare conversation, because another piece of this puzzle is the fact that, and another part of the narrative that I would point out is that we were in this supposed ceasefire with Iran and Israel as well.
Yeah.
And immediately, like within hours of when that ceasefire was declared and agreed upon, then we have Israel beginning to bomb Lebanon, particularly southern Lebanon.
Right.
And that has not stopped. And the other
Nope.
thing is that for a very long time, my understanding of that is that it has been in this, that Hezbollah was classified as a terrorist group and they were fighting Hezbollah. And so that was part of why we were seeing. But now every day on X, there's a Lebanese journalist that I follow, and she's talking about civilians that are being massacred. And it looks very, very reminiscent to what we've been seeing in Gaza. It's not 100% there, but it is. That's what it looks like to me. And what they're talking about, though, is that even though Israel is doing a lot of heavy bombing and a lot of destruction in southern Lebanon, I have been hearing about the drone swarms that Hezbollah is actually employing in order to try to counteract or fight off Israel. So, and of course, like drones are nothing new. So I do think that that's something to keep our eye on as far as what is drone warfare. I mean, we've known about the drone use in warfare for a long time, but it is still currently in the narrative that we're seeing if you begin looking into the conflict between Hezbollah, however you say that, and Israel.
Yeah, well, I mean, drone warfare really is being tested out very effectively in the Ukraine. And it's only advancing. I mean, they have drones that you and I don't even know about, Ashley. And I just hope it doesn't happen over here. I really just hope that the world will take a step back, take a deep breath, and figure this out in a sane, rational manner. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I don't, but I wish it did. So what do you have up on the screen?
So this is one of his comments that I find very interesting, and it does go with what you were saying. The global adjustment to a post-American world is accelerating.
Yeah.
America's once dominant position in the Gulf is just the first of many casualties. So add that statement to like what we're talking about as far as the narratives that we're seeing, that we have this very prominent neocon saying that America's once dominant position in the Gulf is just the first of many casualties. And then pair that with the other bullet point or phrase that I've been hearing people say, that we have created a superpower. So we really have this, the description of the juxtaposition of the United States now paired with Iran, in that there is the reduction or the coming down of or regression maybe of the United States, and this rise of Iran with their new power or their new position of power with the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, I mean, for one, they're kicking our ass in the meme wars. Those Lego videos are the bomb. I got to admit, from a propaganda standpoint. And what this war is also proving in Iran's favor is that the United States military has become a giant paper tiger. And what was securing our economy was a military might. This war is taking that veil off of it, if you will, and showing how ineffective and weak militarily, that's that right, we are. So that's definitely going to increase Iran's standing. It's kind of like the schoolyard bully, right? After a while, someone gets tired of him and pops him in the nose. And then they find out, well, he dropped pretty easy, so he's not so tough. So, hey, guys, let's all take his lunch money now. we're tired of them taking ours. It makes sense.
Yes, and I wanted to bring up this statement as well. So somebody had posted that he writes that what's to be done is, quote, engage in a full-scale ground and naval war to remove the current Iranian
Impossible.
regime and then to occupy Iran until a new government can take hold. So I want to point out again, I'm not a military strategist, but I have heard other people who do have experience and expertise in, at least they're talking heads and they're like colonels and whatever, pundits with military experience speaking about this, that it would actually be, that's an actual disaster for the
It is.
United States.
It
So
is.
this is where I want to bring in something that we had touched on before, but we have this kind of change to the draft. So now there's an automatic registration for the
Mhm.
draft. Not that a draft is being engaged or anything like that, but versus this is a change that's going to be taking place. My understanding is December of 2026 that people, instead of manually registering for the draft, now are going to be automatically registered. And of course, that does not mean that they're automatically going to be drafted or anything like that, but that's just a subtle change. And then this is one of the things that we had kind of talked about in regards to Vietnam, right? Because we know that approximately 2 million men were military aged men were drafted for Vietnam. And
Right.
then the other thing that I want to point out is that the longer that war went on, like in the last 5 years, every year the amount of drafted men who every year the amount of dead was increasingly made up of a higher percentage of drafted men. Okay. And then, of course, something that we've talked about, everybody's probably heard me talk about this now, but McNamara's Folly, where they actually reduced the mental and physical requirements of people to be able to be drafted into the military.
Mhm.
And then pairing that knowledge like with the change to the automatic draft registration, and then him making comments about this, that a ground and naval war needs to be engaged because the bombing isn't cutting it, basically. But then there are other people that are saying that that Iran is sort of this rock bowl, basically a mountain fortress. They have their
Mhm.
munitions supplied underground. They don't know what all they have underground. And it would take millions of men on the ground in order to even mount any kind of ground invasion. And of course, that would be on top of the fact that they never did anything to us, that this whole lie was about preventing them from having a nuclear weapon or continuing to enrich their uranium. Whenever we had
That
already been
before.
told by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth that the capability for that was destroyed. That was forever ago. So anyway, go ahead, Dave. I want to hand that over to you and see what you think.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot. Now let's go back to the ground war. A ground war. No, let's go back. Let me take one step back. Let's talk about the draft. Talk about if that was instituted. For one, because recruiting levels have fallen off so much. I've read articles about how they're lowering the standards now. And that's like what you said about McNamara's Folly. That's been happening. But if I look around and I look at the physical and mental state overall of military aged men in America, and they're a bunch of soy boys. They're spoiled. They don't know hardship. And so I'm supposed to realistically think that you're going to have this draft and take these weak men and send them over and fight overseas on the shore of another nation of hardened, real men. Okay. And it's going to be a success. No, it's a disaster. And you hit another good point. Iran is a big rock bowl. There's only Turkey. There's a few routes. One of them is through Turkey in the northern region, and a couple other ones, but that's it. So we're going to invade that other country. And now that country, which is huge geographically and in very difficult terrain, Even if you get past the mountains, then you got massive deserts. Okay. Then you have logistics supplies. Another thing, if we're going to have we're going to have 2 million people invade Iran. Logistically, how are we going to get them over there? Do we have enough ships to haul that many?
And that's a great question. That's one of the other narratives bullet points that I wanted to bring up after you finish saying what you have to say, is that the idea that we're running low on munitions. That's one of the other narratives that are out there right now. And this would obviously, wouldn't that be something to consider if you're thinking of doing a ground invasion? It's insane.
Well, if one thinks rationally, those would be considerations. We now have a leadership that doesn't think rationally. They don't think honestly. They don't think intellectually. They just react emotionally. Look at Trump. Or they just step to the line that their bosses tell them to. And it's on. For us to go over there and realistically invade Iran, it would be a meat grinder. We don't have the capabilities. We don't have the munitions. We don't have the military to launch something like that. But the scary thing is even with that being said, our leadership just might try. Hey, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Or they're going to take that Trident submarine that they just sent over in that region and light off a big boom boom if Israel doesn't do it first. Now we have gone into the nuclear world. And once you go into that, there's no coming back. That could end up in global destruction, like extinction level type stuff.
Right.
But Trump, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and that's some of the people that I've been watching on Judge Napolitano's show. That's what they're talking about, is the possibility for a major attack, even if it's not nuclear, if it's serious weaponry that's coming from Iran on Israel. They can obviously reach them from there. It's a dangerous game.
Iran can flatten Israel, and Israel has the Samson option. Means if they're going to fall, they're going to light off nukes on friend and foe. And, well, think about this. Orange Jesus thinks about, we're just going to light off a little tactical nuke, a Tom Thumb, maybe a kiloton. We're not going to do the huge mega things. We're just going to drop one to make a point. I could see him doing that shit. And once that happens, we've crossed the nuclear threshold.
Yeah, we've crossed the Rubicon into a very dangerous place for everybody, for the whole world.
And my saving grace is that I live right in between two decommissioned Air Force bases. That's right. That can be recommissioned easily in a time of war, which makes that a target. So if the nukes get lit off, it's instant transition for Natureboy, yo. I won't even know it happened until I'm looking down going, whoa, what happened? And then realize that I'm looking at where I used to live, and it's time for me to run the light as fast as I can. So,
right. Yes. And we pray that does not happen. But yes, if you have to go out, then hopefully it'll be fast and easy.
Yeah, I dig this cosmic spacesuit I've been given. I really dig the ride, and I want to hang out as long as I can. But I also know that this is only rented, and when I leave here, then I got another existence coming. And not saying I have a death wish or I want to, quite the opposite. But when you got to go, you got to go. And personally, I'd rather go in a flash than to sit and spend years suffering like I have seen people and known people when they died. So not to get morbid towards the end of the conversation, but
Well, I think it does go to saying that I I subscribe to what you're saying in that, we want to enjoy the time that we have here and have
Yeah,
gratitude for the time that we have here.
every day's a gift.
And and be grateful for that. So I agree. And then of course that we've seen people who end up suffering. So
I have to.
many of our preferences would be to make a hasty exit if it happens to be that time. So I know that I've kept you for a very long time. I just want to go over really quick
Yeah.
some of these things that we've pointed out, these various narratives. And this is not to make a case on any particular thing at all. It's just to say these are what we're seeing. Okay. So we are seeing that we've created a superpower. We have seen the US is incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. They're being reckless but not intelligent about this. The US is running low on munitions. The US is doing the bidding of Israel for the Greater Israel Project or the Zionist lobby, or Bibi Netanyahu, or however you want to say that. Then we have people like the neocons who are like, oh, we've lost this war. Then we've had mixed messaging from Pete Hegseth and President Trump that we're in a peace agreement, we're not in a peace agreement. Oh, JD Vance, we're in a peace agreement, but they kept bombing. Israel kept bombing Lebanon. That was a misunderstanding. That was never part of the deal. A lot of this, like just these lies. And then the change in registration for the draft. And I'm going to circle back to that because there was a little bit of a question about that in the chat. So before
Okay.
I let you go, Dave, if I
Sure.
may,
Okay.
we've also heard about the fertilizer shortages, the supply chain breakup, the difficulties there, pain at the pump. Obviously, we know as Americans, as soon as this conflict began, our gas went up like too sweet immediately. And it has continued to climb. So I know I have a friend out in LA, it's almost $8 a gallon. A friend up in Canada, it's over $8 a gallon for him now. And then we have seen this real, like, was something that I had related to the strategy of tension before with these insane Trump posts that, like, this very hyperbolic rhetoric. We're going to not obliterate the entire civilization, or we won the war. We didn't, like, very, very crazy back and forth, hot and cold posts that we're getting from Trump. We also have the market manipulation that people are making big money off of this. And then there's a million other things that we have kind of seen as narratives or threads to the picture of what we're seeing there. So I just wanted to see if you had anything to add to that and kind of what you're thinking with all these various little bullet points, I'll say.
No, I think we covered a lot of them. I really don't have anything off the top of my head that I can add to it. You've been taking notes the whole time, that detailed like that?
I had that before, and then I add as we go.
Wow. Wow, touche. I wish I was that organized. I'm sitting here trying to keep up with the conversation, writing stuff down in chicken scratch on my index cards.
Hey,
trying
you
to
can
make sense of it. I'm like,
autograph those and sell them off when you're famous.
yeah, I can dream. If I'm famous, then I'll just give them away. Say, here, I
That's
don't care. You could
very
sell on
generous.
eBay, and you could be rich like me too, peasant. Here you go. It'll be like Rockefeller throwing dimes. Here you go, peasants. eBay. Get yourself a free meal on Davo.
There you go. That's from me, you cutie.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. No,
Okay.
I think it's been a good conversation. I mean, we really covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time.
We've covered a lot, and I feel bad because I know I've just been throwing like all kinds of things at you.
I
But
like that.
in my mind, I was like, I want to cover this. 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 So, okay,
Oh,
cool.
I can empathize. There's times when, I take my index cards, I'm doing show prep, and I have a whole stack of them all organized and stuff like that. And next thing you know, I'm like, wow, man, I only got through it like a one little stack and the show's over. Because
Yeah,
it's
that
just
sounds like
ideas and conversations. That's why I love conversations, because they take on a life of their own.
yes, exactly.
It's like a
Yes.
child. You kind of plan their future, right? But when they're born, they have their own life, and where they end up is you had no idea that you were going there with that child
Right.
but that's where the child left you in a conversations like that. So it's been a good one too.
I agree. Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you for your time. And really,
Sure.
really quick, Dave. I know we got to go, but I just want to give a highlight. So this article, really quick, is from The Hill, and this is just discussing. And Radio Sack, if you want the link to this, it's not a huge change, but it's just eligible men will automatically be registered into the military draft pool by December as part of an effort to streamline the previous process of self-registration and save money. So the SSS, which is Selective Service System, the government agency that maintains a database of men to be called up to serve in the case of a national emergency, submitted a proposed rule to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs on March 30th. Most men between the ages of 18 and 25 are already required to register with Selective Service, but automatic registration was mandated in December of 2025 as part of the fiscal 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. The change, which was meant to save money, which of course I don't subscribe to that, transfers responsibility for registration from individual men to SSS through integration with federal data sources. So not that that is necessarily a huge change, but it was considered something that was on the individual before, and now it's to the SSI. And of course that, or SSS. So that is a possibility of well, how is your data going to be managed? How are they going to be getting that data? So yeah, you're welcome, Radio Sack, for the clarification on that. And before we go, for real, finally, Dave, I want you to talk a little bit about your show, where they can find you. I have your info in the show notes, as well as your, maybe not in Rumble. I'm not sure if it transferred over, but it is somewhere. If somebody wants the info, let me know. But your show, your Twitter handle or X handle, and then a little bit about your guest tomorrow, which is exciting. I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, my podcast is the Thirdrail with Natureboy, and it's a live broadcast live, 5 p.m. Pacific every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on Rumble at the Thirdrail with Natureboy, TNP New Prisoners, and also AM Wake Up Networks. The audio podcast is wherever audio podcasts are served, your Spotify's, your Apple, your Podbeans, your Podomatics. I can be found on Twitter at my handle right there. It's NBN Nature Boy, as in naughty by nature. That's NBN Nature Boy. Hit me up, leave me a comment, give me a follow. I've been trying to get my real person count on Twitter up because I'm Nazi-like about bots. If one replies to anything, they get blocked. And the algorithms hate me. The algorithm suppression game where I'll start building up, I'll get some numbers, and then they just start getting taken away. So hit me up on Twitter. If you like the show, leave me a comment. Like I say, hate listeners are welcome. I wish people would go out there and actually them haters would go out and throw hate parties and bring all their friends over and watch Nature Boy, because you're just helping my numbers and make me look good, people. That's all there is to it. And as far as my guest tomorrow night, this is a cat that I've been following. His name's Tosh Plumley. He's 88 years old, I believe. And he is an OG former CIA covert pilot in the Iran-Contra days, for one. He goes back to the Bay of Pigs, to the Kennedy assassination. He knows and worked with people like E. Howard Hunt, if you know who he is, and all those people. So I'm sure he knew the David Ferries of the world. He's a real interesting cat. And I just really want to pick his brain, because it's one thing to talk to somebody who researched something about an incident. It's another thing to talk to the person who was there and can give you firsthand accounts. And that's what I'm hoping I'm going to get with old Tosh tomorrow night. So Thirdrail with Nature Boy on Rumble, 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, and your shows have been really good. You've had a lot of interesting guests. I'm not just saying that because I was on there. I'm not
Oh, there
just
you are
saying
right
that
there.
because I was on there, but no, you've had a lot of really good and interesting conversations with people, and Wheezy, William Ramsey, myself, Jason Barker, and I for like a joint show with Tim, the Antarctic conversation. So a lot of good stuff there if people are not sure where to find you. And then you have a very funny way of describing the 3 different chats. You say that yours for the Thirdrail is the
Wine
wine
club.
crowd,
Yeah,
right?
that's where you can go there, hang out, have a glass of wine, talk about some good ideas, meet some interesting people.
That's
Then,
where I usually hang out.
but yeah, then we got the AM wake up. That's like the dive bar. You know, take a few shots, slam a few beers, shoot a little pool, talk some smack. Then we've got the mosh pit, which is my favorite one over on TMP, the New Prisoners. That's just a flat out mosh pit. If you go there, it's a fun chat, great people. But remember, any mosh pit, elbows up, everybody, and don't be a dick, and you'll have a good time. So those are my chats. I like it. I really like the audience engagement. So I like doing live stuff. Then again, I prefer doing. My background has always been live music, live emceeing. So
Yeah.
it kind of goes along with my shtick, if you will.
Indeed. And I appreciate we have a good amount of people in the chat. It's been an active
Nice.
chat. So I apologize for not being able to get in touch with everybody, but I appreciate you being here and your contribution to the chat. I've been able to catch a few things, and Sweets is in there sharing some links, and we've gotten some good feedback and some saying that I need to put a Radio Sack is saying I need to put a profile pic. Probably so. Maybe I'll work on that at some point. Thank you. And then some other folks that just said that they enjoyed the show. Much love. Thank you all. So I'm going to shout them out really quick. We had Little John. We had Sam, SMU Haskey, Levi, Narrow Way, Narrow Gate. Wheezy stopped in. He said Ashley for president. And I agree. I mean, Wheezy's like an anarchist, so I don't think he would vote for me, but maybe we can get that maybe he would. Harry Hart, Tony Ty, Ghost Art, Jason Barker, Nostradamus, Full Armor Farms, that's Ryan, Sweets, Bronx Stomper, Wally Walrus, Billy Ray Valentine, Handy, Dustin Helm, WJH, Faber Lignarius, and I don't know. Is that Latin or something? I'm not sure if you're still here. Joseph Duffy, Radio Sack, Hiker Emoji, Kuda Bing, and then I had Western Civ over on YouTube, and I think I said Nostra. If I forgot anybody, I'm terribly sorry. I tried to keep track of everybody today, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us live. I truly appreciate it. I do not take that lightly, and I'm very honored. Dave, thank you so much. I know I've taken up a ton of your time. I know you're busy, but I really, really appreciate it. So thank you all so much. And really quick, I wanted to shout out Doc Rock. He's the one that made my intro and my outro, and I really appreciate him for doing that. He's a good buddy of mine, and we're going to try to do a movie night. And of course, as you know, hit me up if you want his Discord link. He does movie night on Saturday and on Monday night. So thanks everyone else who helped me to do this project, all your support. Thank you. And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.